that save the world. We have competing speakers. My name is Joe Ecology. I'm with Daybreak Rotary here in town. A lot of you know me or have heard the name. I'm here to introduce Mike Brown, whichever Mike would like to go by. Serving as executive director of the Ecology Action Center since November of 2007. Mike came and spoke to our club. He's a diverse background in environmental work, including training volunteers in ecological monitoring for the Illinois Ecology Services Peace Corps, volunteer in Bulgaria, management of a 320-acre education park for the Peoria Park District. The list is in your program. I encourage you to look that up. Locally, we have a Parklands Foundation that's maintaining and restoring native prairie ground, which is kind of cool. Parklands is a beautiful area to go out and visit as well. I've done some work out there with our Rotary clubs and clearing trees and doing burns and so forth. Mike came and spoke to our club, and he brought some of these flyers, which I encourage you to take, and taught me an interesting lesson in that some of the stuff that I was recycling and thinking, hey, I'm doing the world a good, I'm throwing all this stuff in my recycle bin. So what I was putting in there was inappropriate, was actually contaminating the waste stream. That may be stealing some of Mike's thunder, but it was actually creating a problem. So I was thinking, oh, hey, this little plastic lid that I get from Hardee's or wherever drive-through, it's plastic, it's got a little symbol on there, but well, no. What happens when it hits the recycling center is at least it looked normal, there's a little puff of air that says through this $3 million enhancement we did locally, it sends it to the garbage bin, which if I'd known better, I could have done that myself. So why have the sorters do it, whether it be physically at a center or at a highfalutin fancy piece of machinery. So it envisioned everybody else that thinks they're doing good, creating this monster amount of trash at the recycling center, thinking we're doing the right thing. So I encourage you to take one of these, but also learn more about what your communities are doing if they're utilizing recycling. So there's a lot of good things that are recyclable, a lot of things that aren't. Unfortunately, my trash load almost doubled. It seems like just because I couldn't recycle as much as I thought I could. So it's an interesting spin. I took that same message back to my office. We had a center meeting, announced it, posted the flyer. I actually downloaded it off their website. Some of the pictures, people love pictures. I found motor oil can in our recycle bin at the office. Okay, you're never going to rinse that clean ever. And it was dirty on the outside, so I'm thinking, okay, people at least knew more about it, and if you go back and say something to either your clubs, or you can take that same message, pass it on, invite your local recycling folks, Ecology Action Center. So Mike's got a neat message. I learned a lot. I told him just outside that he saved my life. It was somewhat of an exaggeration, but it was a warm, feel-good moment, and with these things, we can make a difference and do what we can to save our planet. So with that, I give you Mike Brown.
So I do want to say up front, I'm fighting sinus infection here today, and so I'm not as articulate and clear as I usually like to be. And so if you cannot understand me, it's not offensive to just say, can you repeat that? I can't understand you.
Should we move to the back of the room?
It's a sinus infection, so unless you get into my sinuses, you should be fine, not contagious. So thank you for that wonderful introduction. It is really nice to hear that we have an impact, because that's what we're trying to do. We are trying to help our community live more sustainably, provide for a healthier environment for us all, because that's really where we're at nowadays. The environment, this is not a feel-good thing. This is about our own health and well-being. This is environmental health, how the environment treats us back, in reaction to how we treat the environment. And so I really love to hear that our message is being heard. So thank you, Joe. Can I real quick just show of hands? So how many of you are local, Bloomington Normal versus further away? Okay, so about half and half. That's good. That works. So some of you are likely aware of the Ecology Action Center. We are a nonprofit environmental sustainability agency here in Bloomington Normal, working closely with the city of Bloomington, the town of Normal, and McLean County. Essentially, we're a contractor for them. We've consolidated a lot of different environmental services under one roof. So a lot of different functions in terms of working with waste and recycling, clean water, energy efficiency, air quality, and we do this through a variety of different programs and initiatives that we have in the community. And we don't have time today to really talk about all of these, but we'll touch base on just a little bit of these here today. For those of you who don't live in Bloomington Normal, we unfortunately can't provide our services directly to you, but there hopefully is a counterpart to us. It might actually be within a governmental agency. We're kind of unique that we're a nonprofit and we do all of this. Usually these, especially ones related to specific environmental mandates, these are usually done by some government employee that's kind of an add-on to their job. We're lucky that we're able to consolidate all this because we're passionate environmental professionals, and so we really go above and beyond. We're not trying to help the community just meet environmental mandates. We're trying to improve our local environment for our own well-being. And so that's what I'm here to talk about here today. So we're talking about climate change. We're talking about air quality issues. This is, unfortunately, still in this day and age, a controversial topic, which still blows my mind. And if anybody wants to, get into controversy and debate things, we can do that, but maybe let's do that afterwards. And so why don't we get through some of the facts and numbers and such I have here to show you today. And if we want to debate, I'm happy to debate, but that's not as interesting as focusing on our message here. And so the issue is really rising levels of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. You can see just in this past century how far up carbon dioxide levels have risen from below 320 parts per million to over 400 parts per million. This is data pulled today, so they don't have today's data yet, but as of yesterday, 408 parts per million. It's been hovering there for a few days. It usually goes down in the fall, goes up other times of year. And so essentially this is astronomically high. This is at levels that have not been seen in, well, nearly a million years, all right? So here we are. This is actually, the past century, and yet we go back 100,000, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800,000 years, and we have not had carbon dioxide levels in our atmosphere that are what we're seeing today. And coincidentally, this rise in carbon dioxide levels does coincide with the usage of fossil fuels, the combustion of fossil fuels, the release of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And as a result, we have a similar rise in average temperatures worldwide. And here we even have 4 different entities showing the same exact data in terms of what they say is our average temperature rise that's happening over time here. And so climate change is happening and causing an average change in temperature, which is resulting in a number of different impacts, and a lot of them are going to hit us specifically here in Illinois, in central Illinois. And so looking at issues on agriculture, and they're saying that we're gonna have much wetter springs, much hotter, drier summers. Does that sound familiar to anyone? No. What happened this year? Public health issues. So I'm gonna get into ozone a little bit. And ozone is its own separate issue, but ozone as well will increase. There's kind of a rebound effect that will cause ozone issues to become even worse. Ozone is very closely correlated with respiratory disease and asthma in particular, and so we're going to see increased incidence of those issues. Yes?
Yeah, let's see. Would you be able to go back 2 slides to that
Yes.
time scale? It looked like the small fluctuations might have an interval of around 50,000 years. I mean, yeah. Actually, that's close to 80,000 years, I think, between those peaks and valleys. And then that's the minor stuff.
Sure.
That's well below
Right.
the current
And
level.
that's natural and normal, and
Right.
that's pre-human existence.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
And so there are prehistoric, it's not historic, fluctuations that occur naturally through various natural factors, but it is this meteoric rise that we're concerned with that is unheard of in nearly a million years, and is definitely very closely correlated with human activities.
Thanks.
And Extreme heat. There was a report released just several months ago from the Union of Concerned Scientists talking about extreme heat events, which already we've had even within this past century. And I forget which year in Chicago that there was dozens of deaths from extreme heat. That's going to happen more frequently, especially in big urban centers where there's just so much heat congregated and absorbed and held. And these are going to unfairly impact low-income communities who do not have means to escape from extreme heat. Looking at increased frequency of severe weather events, which we are seeing a lot of extreme weather events in the past 5-10 years. Some of those, they can correlate with climate change. Some of those they can't. So we can't jump to conclusion that every time there's a new tornado that's climate change, but they do have a way of trying to correlate these, and they are correlating a lot of these with climate change. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think you could also add to public health that disease that has never been seen before in certain areas is becoming more prevalent. Sometimes related to fleas or other insects that are just moving their locations.
The spread of ticks, the range of ticks, Thank you. And so yes, there definitely are, as pest species in particular, which tend to be more aggressive and have less predators and be kind of take advantage. They're opportunists taking advantage of kind of mediocre habitat. As that sort of habitat spreads all over, then yes, then disease that are carried by those vectors, absolutely. And that list was very short. I mean, I'm trying to be factual and informative without going too dark here. And so environmental professionals are often criticized to just go in gloom and doom. So I'm trying to be factual and balanced here. I could go very dark, but I don't like to do that. And as Joe has pointed out, it's more successful when we don't. And so if we talk about the positives and the opportunities, then that's where we can often have more success and reach people better. But just reality. So this year in Illinois, I'm not a farmer. I come from a line of farmers, but yet I'm not a farmer myself. I can't say that I recall another planting season like this. There probably has been one in my lifetime, but this scared me this year, even not as a farmer, that we almost didn't get the crops in because it was so wet. This was the wettest spring on record in Illinois ever. And that is exactly what they've been saying for 10, 20 years is going to be the future of Illinois. And so agriculture being our dominant industry here, we need to be thinking about that in adaptations. Jim Angel, retired climatologist from the state of Illinois, just recently retired, but he's talking about this as well. And yes, obviously the wettest spring in history here. We need to be changing how we look at agriculture if we want agriculture to survive in Illinois. There's as well, speaking of severe weather incidents, so this is my hometown of Washington, Illinois. Tornado that hit 4 or 5 years ago. In a matter of 10 minutes, destroyed 500 homes. I was there just a couple of hours after. It was just a war zone, and this has been referred to as one of the impacts of climate change. This specific event they have correlated. This was the day after Thanksgiving, a week before Thanksgiving, and so the range of tornadoes that we're now seeing, late winter tornadoes and early winter tornadoes, that's never happened in Illinois, or not with the frequency that does now. I think it's the next slide.
Yeah, thunder snow. I hadn't heard of that term until the last 4 or 5 years.
Let's just end that video. So these are just some of the issues and threats that we're talking about. So what are we doing about it? So as the Sustainability and Environmental Agency in Bloomington Normal, we are working to collect data in order to make plans so that we can reduce our impact and hopefully start to turn things around. So starting several years ago, we did what's called a baseline inventory of greenhouse gas emissions. This is looking at the sources of emissions that we cause here in our community. Where are they coming from? What can we attribute them to? So we have some baseline data, and then we've been following that up with a repeat inventory. So that's what I'm here to talk about today, is the data that we have. This is hard data for Bloomington Normal, where emissions are coming from, and this is the start of a process to actually reduce those emissions. And so essentially the point of this is to quantify for planning purposes, be able to look at trends across years, be able to guide our efforts in the community and in the most cost-effective manner, guide our efforts so that we can deal with climate change. But at the same time, there's all other benefits that can come from this as well, other public health benefits, cost efficiencies, energy efficiency, money saved, while we're also reducing emissions. And so all that's kind of tied up into this. So the basics of an emissions inventory is identifying and quantifying the greenhouse gas emissions over the course of the year and correlating them with those activities that do cause those specific emissions. There's a number of different greenhouse gases. We most often just talk about carbon dioxide. There's actually a number of different gases with different potencies. This global warming potential is kind of the potency of how strong the greenhouse gas is. Carbon dioxide is actually the weakest, and yet it is the most in volume. And so that's kind of the default one. In the course of our study, these are the three we look at. We tend to ignore these three because they're very insignificant in their actual volume, even though they're very potent, but also those are less common and come usually from industrial sources. And so in the course of our study, we're looking at the more common ones that come from more generalized sources. And in the course of this, we do convert all these to carbon dioxide equivalents. And so we talk about CO2e. So we just put it all into apples as opposed to having apples, oranges, bananas, pineapples, lemons, and limes.
That's good.
Thank you. Didn't know where I was going with that. And the study itself as well kind of breaks our community down into two separate sub-studies. One being the local government operations itself, because local government, actually we're doing this on their behalf, and they have more ability to change things on shorter notice and then really affect more change more quickly than we can on the community-wide scale. When we're looking at changing the practices, the habits of all of our residents, all of our businesses, everybody in the community, that's going to take more time, more planning, more effort. And so we segregate our data so that we can look at these individually. The other issue of ozone that I mentioned, and this is something that we look at in our study as well, this is one of the air quality pollutants that is regulated on the federal level under the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. It is one that is detrimental to public health associated with respiratory disease, with asthma. We are considered borderline non-attainment for ozone, and we've been there a long time. Ozone comes from some industrial sources, but definitely also it's a combination of different emissions, nitrous emissions, and volatile organic compounds in the atmosphere, a lot of that coming from automobiles and burning of fossil fuels. And so we've kind of tied these things together in our emissions inventory because fossil fuels are contributing to ozone, which is a public health risk, and it's also contributing to climate change. So any strategies that can reduce one will help reduce the other as well. And so we're coupling these together for benefit on multiple levels. So here, this does show how we are essentially borderline for non-attainment. The standards had been tightened several years ago, and so actually under the new standard, which isn't really being enforced yet, we've actually exceeded what's allowable. Under the old standard, we're still under there. Currently, we are seeing a lot of rollback of environmental regulations, and so honestly, under the current administration that's in place, I don't see this new standard being enforced. There is even talk of rollback. But the fact is, regardless of where that line is, that's somewhat arbitrary. There's public health impacts regardless from high levels of ozone. So turning to our comparison of emissions, of carbon emissions specifically, the carbon equivalents between our 2008 baseline and our 2015 repeat inventory. We're actually seeing a bit of an increase in both our local municipalities. We're seeing a bit of a decrease overall in our community, and we'll get into why that is. But first, kind of breaking this down, pardon me, our total picture of emissions, our municipal emissions are actually a very small sliver of the whole. Almost 98% of the total emissions is in that community inventory, and municipal inventories are much smaller. And so, again, while we do have likely more ability to make more rapid change there, we need to make change in the big picture as well, because that's where the majority of the emissions actually lie. So here we are breaking it down via different governmental entities, because when I say municipal or local government, LGO, that means all kind of our public services in Bloomington Normal. So we have city or town of Normal, city of Bloomington, a wastewater treatment plant, and then our public transit service. And so in each of these, we're looking at 2008 versus 2015, and we do have that slight increase in both Bloomington Normal, with a slight increase in wastewater, with a slight, very, very slight increase in public transit. So let's just call that more or less the same, unchanged. Looking at our community scale, 2008 versus 2015, our dark purple is stationary energy, our light blue transportation, the yellow at the top is solid waste sources. To define each of these, stationary energy is like this building right here. So it's all the lighting, the heating, the cooling, my computer, the projector, stationary energy, how we're utilizing this building is stationary energy, whereas transportation is obviously vehicles. It's cars, it's trucks, it's trains, even planes. And then the solid waste, that's all the waste we generate that goes in a landfill, specifically organic waste, not our inert plastics, metals, things like that. Organic waste in a landfill, and this is actually a big misconception. A lot of people think if you take a paper plate at the restaurant, which isn't really an option anymore, if you take a paper plate versus plastic, you put that in the trash, that's okay, because that's going to go on the ground and it's going to break down, and that's okay. The reality is a landfill is a closed system with no oxygen. They push the oxygen out of it, they seal it shut. So if you remember your chemistry, this is what's called an anaerobic environment without oxygen. And that's where only anaerobic bacteria operate. Anaerobic bacteria work very, very slowly because they don't have enough resources to work quickly, and they create methane. So anything natural you put in a landfill is actually not a good thing. It's not going to be okay. It's not just going to break down. It's going to break down very slowly, releasing methane the whole time. Methane being a greenhouse gas 20 times more potent than carbon dioxide. And so all of that yellow up there, that's from paper plates, newspapers, clothing, food scraps that we're putting in the trash. And while it's not significant in the whole, it's significant enough, and it's something that we can do something about. Just to point that out there. So anyway, to get back to our comparison here, 2008 stationary energy emissions went down in 2015. From 2008 to 2015, transportation emissions went up. And in that same time period, our waste emissions remained about the same. Any guesses so far on this trend of why our stationary is going down, our transportation is going up? Any thoughts on that? We will get to it. I'll tell you the answer, but
I think there's a great appeal for gas guzzling vehicles. And it's almost like the human nature for status, you know, you don't want to be smaller than your neighbor's vehicle. And you got to have four-wheel drive even if they're on level prairie, because you might get stuck up a hill.
you might. Yes, SUVs are incredibly popular. I mean, there's been some, ups and downs in the popularity, but right now they're almost ubiquitous. The sales of them continue to increase, and so we're buying bigger vehicles, we're buying more vehicles. So yeah, transportation emissions on the national scale are rising. And so we're following the national trend in that our transportation emissions are becoming more and more significant. And actually on the national scale, transportation emissions on are now the largest source of carbon emissions is all from transportation. And so that's definitely a big category we need to address.
Can we go back to the paper plate and the food scraps?
Yes.
I am a consummate recycler, and I
Yes.
probably also recycle lots of things I shouldn't. I compost.
Yes.
But I don't use paper plates as a rule, but
Sure.
occasionally.
Sure.
And things like meat,
Yes.
scraps, don't go in the compost. So what do you do with that stuff?
Right. And so that's going to vary by community, and you're doing what you can, and I appreciate that. And composting for a lot of people is beyond them. Composting is like really advanced recycling. It scares a lot of people that they think it's too messy, it's going to attract pests and whatnot. Even doing it right, and the fact that you know that you don't put your meat in there, that's excellent. A lot of people, when they do start composting, they'll just kind of like wishful recycling. They'll wishful compost, and they'll throw everything in there, and then yeah, they're going to have critters, a lot of critters. But yeah, so we currently in our community don't have residential composting services where you can take the things that you can't put in backyard composting: meat, dairy, fat, animal waste, all those things that are going to create problems, and actually you just can't get your backyard compost hot enough to kill off the pathogens from those things like you can with vegetable matter. And so we don't have that right now. That is something that's in our new solid waste plan for the next 20 years, is to come up with a system. It won't necessarily be curbside service like we have recycling, because the cost effectiveness of that is not going to be there for a long time. So extreme West Coast and East Coast communities that have long lost their landfills because they're so populated that the landfills are a state or two away, their landfilling is so cost prohibitive that curbside compost service is cost effective. And so they're able to provide that. But for us, while we are filling up our landfills, we're doing it much slower, and we got all this flat space around us, and it's very valuable and much better used for agriculture or other purposes, but yet we don't have the pressure of landfills filling that creates that cost effectiveness for compost collection. So we're not there yet, we're getting there. Be patient.
So for now, I can throw them away.
You can, that's the only thing you do.
Thank you.
But actually one of my hints that I have later on is, so you said meat scraps, well, you can eat less meat, and that's another benefit. And then it has benefits in the production side and the emissions there, but then you're gonna have emissions reduction there in the waste disposal too. So there's that. Where were we? Breaking down further our community scale inventory, and this is by specific types of emissions as opposed to just kind of broad categories. And so here our pie chart is showing us electricity generation is by far our largest source. Natural gas emissions, which is largely used for heating, is going to be second. Third, we have vehicular transportation. We have a small slice that's rail travel, a small slice that's air travel, and then a small portion that is that waste landfill. And this is just breaking down kind of the transportation sector even further. So aircrafts do show up here and there as small, but to put a qualifier on that, we can't accurately calculate our impact for this community specifically for air travel, because it's even hard to attribute which of that is ours. Is it every plane that flies over our city? Is it every plane that leaves our city? Every plane that comes in our city? We don't really know how far even that traveler is going, and so that's something that is largely very underestimated, the air travel impact. We know air travel is very costly in terms of emissions, and so I would just caution you not to read too much into that. But we do know that single occupancy vehicle use is significant and a growing source. So looking at different sectors here, we have residential versus commercial versus industrial. Blue being residential, light blue commercial, yellow being industrial. And so we're seeing regular electricity usage in our commercial going down from 2008 to 2015. We're seeing our residential going up a bit. We're seeing our industrial going down. And here, as we look at natural gas, not a lot of fluctuation there. So this one actually gets us to the answer. If we're looking at the community side of our emissions and the net decrease that we're seeing in emissions, especially in that stationary energy, this actually has the answer. And so does anyone want to take a guess at what this is telling us? And I'm happy to just tell you if
Let's call.
that's cool. So this is showing us the past several years, and this is the generation of our electricity. Where does our electricity come from? What fuel sources are we using? And so coal used to be very significant. It has been declining. Natural gas is taking up the gap there. Natural gas does create carbon emissions, but much less than coal does. What is causing that? Why are we using more natural gas and less coal?
Price.
Hydraulic fracturing. Hydraulic fracturing has depressed the price of natural gas, making it much more cost-effective for electricity generation than coal. And so it's economics, which is actually right now driving business away from coal and more towards natural gas. And so it would be nice if that was an intentional strategy, but this is just economics and the advent and increase in hydraulic fracturing. We can see as well up here, we do have an increase in wind power, which we've definitely seen, over these years, the increase in wind farms in central Illinois and across Illinois. Solar doesn't specifically show up, except for at the very top, does say other resources. And so I'm going to say solar's up in there. If we could continue this out several years, we could probably see a bigger and bigger chunk, because these past couple of years have been a big boom in solar power generation. So that was Illinois. This is nationally, and this is actually the same thing here. We see coal usage declining, natural gas use picking up to fill that gap, again, due to economic forces. Here as well, in national trends, we see transportation emissions going up, while we see our electric power, so stationary energy usage going down. So our local emissions profile is exactly mimicking what is happening on the national scale. We're not unique. So what can you do about it? What can we do about it? What can anybody do about this? Well, if we step back for a second again, look at our major sources of emissions. And so regardless of the actual change between years, our biggest source of emissions is stationary energy. How we heat, cool, our businesses, our homes, everything, our municipalities. All of that, the heating, the cooling, the lighting, the equipment, the computers, is our most significant source. Our growing source is transportation, and waste is still significant as well. So we need strategies that are going to address these specific categories of emissions. So there's a lot of different things that you can do, and this is just really a short list here. Looking at your own household carbon footprint, there's online calculators. You can figure out where your emissions are really coming from if you go and do an accurate accounting. You can look at converting more and more of your appliances, more of your devices, more of your lighting to more energy efficient systems, including LED lighting. And so I know CFL lighting, which was kind of in between incandescents and LEDs, people didn't like that. They were kind of crappy. The color was off. They didn't last as long as they were supposed to. We were all pretty disappointed. They were burning out pretty quick, and it contained mercury, which is pretty bad stuff. And so I'm really excited that we have now transitioned to LED. And LED is now as cheap as CFL lighting in most cases, and yet it's better. It's so much more efficient. And so CFL lighting, I think, saves about 70% of the energy over an incandescent, whereas LED lighting, putting out the same amount of light, saves 90% of the energy. And so incredibly efficient. They say LED bulbs are going to last us 30, 40, 50 years, as opposed to the anticipated 10 years for CFLs, which didn't turn out to be accurate. It's still, they're going to have longer life, which means less replacing, which means less upfront cost while you're still saving money on your lighting. And so I encourage everybody, when you can, upgrade. And actually, Ameren has great programs. Ameren will give you free LED lights for your home or for your business. If you're not aware of those programs, look into that, take advantage of that free stuff. Weatherization. So this is where you're really going to see the benefits on that stationary energy. So how well insulated is your home? How well are the drafts sealed? Have you had an energy audit at your house? If you're a Bloomington normal resident, we will give you an energy audit for $20. If $20 is too much of a hardship, you just have to say, and we will waive that. We want you to get an energy audit. And so it's a very comprehensive energy audit telling you where you can save more energy in your house, where there are gaps in insulation, where there are air leaks, where you can be saving more energy, more money. And so weatherization is huge. I had my house, 1940s house, insulated several years ago, cellulose insulation blown tightly into all the exterior walls. It was night and day immediately, just the comfort level in my home. And so, and our utility bills dropped dramatically. You will earn back your money investing into weatherization. And so everybody needs to do that for your pocketbook, but then as well, we're reducing our energy used and the emissions that come from that. Waste issues. So obviously recycle, but recycle properly, recycle well, but reduce waste is even more important. And composting, as we discussed, and composting properly. So transportation, why is that big category that is growing, that is significant, that we really need to address? And so what can we all do to use our vehicles less, especially single occupancy vehicle use? It is so wasteful, especially in our SUVs. And so more carpooling, more public transportation, more walking, more biking, which is good for your health and well-being and mental health. I mean, we're so fortunate here in Bloomington Normal to have such a great trail system, an increased amount of bike lanes on streets. And so, yes, it's not easy to do year-round. There can be bad weather, but yet when the weather's wonderful, it is just a great way to get to and from work and where we need to go. The other nice advance there, I'm sure you're all aware of the Rivian factory that is very much up and coming here in Bloomington Normal, high-end electric vehicles, trucks and SUVs. And so this might be for those who absolutely refuse to get rid of their SUVs. They can have it both ways if they can afford the sticker price, which is a bit high. But those are beautiful, incredible vehicles that may help people make the transition so we can reduce emissions while still living a semi-comfortable life. Plants. So eating more vegetarian food, eating less meat. So this was something I learned back in biology class in college. There we talked about trophic levels in ecology, and that you have your plants, which are eaten by your herbivores, which are eaten by your predators, and so all these different trophic levels. So each time you go up a trophic level, essentially that's more energy it takes to support those high-end trophic species, because all these other resources have been broken down just to get up there to support them. And so us eating meat means that we are eating a cow that we had to feed a lot of grain and put a lot of water and take care of that for its useful life. Whereas if we just went back down lower, a couple trophic levels, we're putting less resources into growing the vegetable matter. And I'm not saying everybody has to give up meat. If we eat less meat, then that's going to create less emissions. It's cheaper in environmental economics to eat less meat. Local. Local has been a big push for many years now. Buy your consumer goods locals. Support local businesses, especially those ones who are generating their goods locally. And local farms, your local organic farms, are a great way to get good, fresh, healthy food and reduce your footprint at the same time. And then finally, advocacy. What kind of world do you really want to live in? Do we want to live in a world where the climate is getting unstable and it's not going to be able to support, our industry, our families, our health and well-being as we know it and we've gotten accustomed? So if not, then we do need to raise our voices and say so to our elected officials. And of course, there are a lot of rollbacks that have been going on. You can keep in touch with those on various websites. And so, as I said, what can you do about it? We go back to the slide from early on, talking about what we do. So we're trying to be the answer, what you can do about it here in Bloomington Normal. And in those of you who live in other communities, there should be other people doing this kind of stuff. Take advantage of the services we provide. And so we provide education and strategies on clean water protection. We provide a lot of information on proper recycling and better recycling. We provide opportunities for hazardous waste collection. We provide low-cost home energy audits. We provide low-cost solar programs. We provide the sustainable yard care program to help reduce pollutants going into our water supplies. So take advantage of your local resources. And if they don't exist yet, try and help make them exist. There's no need to recreate the wheel. There's lots of people, lots of organizations doing great efforts like this around the country and around the world. And so why not help start up some services and programs like this in your community if they don't already exist. So there's been a lot of reports in the past few years about climate change, about the impact, about how fast it's coming, and about what we can and should do about it. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change in their reports about a year and a half ago said it is coming and it's coming fast. And yet they were confident. This is the best scientists in the world, the best climatologists in the world working on this and studying this for decades. They said we still can address it. It's not too late. But the answer, what we have to do, is all of the